Hey everyone, welcome to Rebloom, the podcast where we explore the power of change, rediscovery, and living with intention.
That's right. We're your hosts, Lori and Jamie, two friends who really love a good story about transformation.
In each podcast, we're going to chat with inspiring guests who've made bold pivots in their lives or careers. They've let go of what no longer served them to embrace something more authentic, joyful, and true to who they really are.
And the best part, many of them reconnect with passions or dreams they discovered as kids. It's about finding the seeds planted long ago and letting them bloom again.
So if you're ready for real conversations about reinvention, purpose, and following your creative heart, you're in the right place.
Let's dive in and see what it takes to rebloom. This conversation is really, really powerful and profound. I knew it would be. I've known Hildie not a long time, but I've met her. And when I did meet her, it was very profound and it changed my life. So I think some things in this conversation will hopefully change others. I love what she had to share about writing your dreams. And then writing down also your worries and on a separate piece of paper.
Yes.
All the things that will get in the way. So I just really hope that our listeners really tune into this one because it's a powerful one.
It is. And I'll be honest, parts of it are hard. We're talking about grief. We're talking about loss. And for myself, that's a very difficult conversation to have. However, it's a really important conversation to have because those who are grieving, those who have lost, those who are maybe at the end of their life need to talk and we need to share. And Hildie is an incredible person who is helping those in the middle of their lives to coach them, but she's also helping those at the end of their lives. And what an important person for everyone to hear today. So this is going to be one that I hope all of our listeners will tune into.
Absolutely.
Thank you all. Awesome. Well, hello, Lori. How are you today?
Hey, Jamie. I'm excited for this conversation today.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited. You know, we have talked to so many people who have pivoted within their own careers and maybe known why or didn't know why. But today's guest actually helps people with those pivots. And how blessed, or maybe she can help us too. I'm hoping.
Oh, absolutely. And so I'll do a little intro on Hildie Dunn is our guest. And I was lucky enough to meet Hildie years ago at a retreat that Amy Butler held, who is another person that we have interviewed and is wonderful.
Oh, she's amazing.
And it was just the most beautiful retreat. And I learned a type of exercise called intensati. And my friend and I that we attended together were cracking up at ourselves because we weren't so nimble as some of the other people in the group. But I loved
maybe some non-intense sati.
Yeah, exactly. I loved the retreat, and we did some really great in-depth work on our lives and what we want and what we don't want. And it was just a beautiful retreat. That's how I met Hildie. That's what she has done for the last 15 years. So welcome, Hildie. We're so glad you're with us today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, we are too. We can't wait to dig in. And so I was with Amy a couple weekends ago, and we were talking about the podcast, and like I just had this lightning bolt moment where I'm like, oh my gosh, Hildie would be perfect for this because this is what she does. She coaches people. She helps people through different difficult decisions in their lives and pivot points. And so we wanted this to be a mix of your journey and your pivot points, but also maybe sharing advice for people who are wanting to make changes in their lives.
Oh, I love that because, part of it is a story, but then the other part of it is really understanding change is not easy. And
Mm-mm.
change can be scary. And it really forces you to live from, you have to remember where you're going to have the inspiration to like do the scary thing.
Absolutely. I was with someone talking about change and goal setting, and they likened it to if you're going to go on a trip somewhere and you tell all your friends, come with me on this adventure, but you don't know where they say, where are we going? Well, I don't know. Well, how are we going to get there? Well, I don't know. Like, how many people are going to go along with you? And that really stuck with me, that you really do have to set intention
Yeah.
and processes in place to help you get there.
Yes. And what I also say is you also have to have emotion in it, because otherwise it becomes a goal. And goals are very easy to shut down and not do. But if you add what I call writing a dream, if you add the dream that has like feeling and emotion and expression underneath it, that now becomes not only inspiring for you, but it's a lot easy to quit on something that when you've connected to it in an emotional way.
I
Like
love that.
most, like just think about it. Most people will sell out on their dreams or dumb their dreams down, and then you dumb it down a little bit and you dumb it down a little bit and you dumb it down, and all of a sudden you're at a very bland place with your dream. But when you write the dream from the place of like intention of but emotion, it now elevates it. So it inspires you, it wakes you up, it pulls you forward versus having to like put the hiking boots on and trudge forward.
Can you give a really practical example, like, what someone claiming to set a goal looks like versus somebody setting a goal with emotion behind it?
Okay. So just let's just take me for
Okay.
example. If I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, I want to build my business and I want to and I'm committing to 5 new people this month. So by the end of the year, I'm now 25 new people and I'm packed. Like you can, however, and I'm just looking at my stuff because I want to show you, I wrote the dream for myself, right? So now instead of just going like I'm building it and I'm going to have these people and they're coming and I'm making X amount of dollars, I write, I'm a radical healer on my divine mission. I speak and live boldly. I'm an expert, a visionary who coaches with wisdom and builds with heart. I'm a light bringer and my joy is infectious. My teaching at Rutgers is a game changer for them and for me. I'm a leader in the world of dying, making a profound difference the world is desperately waiting for. I'm a stand for teaching others to either design their death powerfully or design their goodbyes with heart and honesty. I'm a magnetic speaker who leads to sold out events, conferences, workshops, and podcasts. Work is like play, and I dance in the honor of changing lives.
Wow.
Now,
Wow.
underneath that, I
Wow.
have some goals. 5 new clients. I speak at one conference. I do 5 podcasts a quarter. Like then I can have it underneath it. But otherwise, I will tiptoe out of a podcast. I will tiptoe out of a speaking engagement. I will like wiggle my way out of anything that's hard. But
Wow.
when I read that every morning, which is why it's sitting here, which is why it's so easy for me to pull it up for you, is because I remind myself every day about what I want to play for.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, this is probably a good point in the conversation for you to take us back a little bit on
Yeah.
your own career and your path and where you are today, which is what you had just read to us.
Yeah. Your initial dreams, maybe too.
Yeah. So I was a dean at a college and I loved coaching. I was a freshman academic advisor. I loved that work. However, there was something missing in it for me and I could just feel it. And as my kids, as I started to have kids and working at a university takes a lot of time, I was like, wait, what's missing here? The ability to work with people like me who like
Mm-hmm.
needs to now evolve. So all of my work has been, every time I wanted to evolve, I'd like take everybody with me and I go. It's like, oh, I think life coaching at that point was not, you know, you did counseling, you were, you know, therapy, but there was not a lot of life coaching. But what I liked about life coaching is it took people where they were and helped them understand why you're stuck and what to do about it. And sometimes people are stuck because they haven't languaged what they want, which means you're not really clear of what you want. You know, so if you don't know where you're going, like Laura, you were saying, you're not going to get there.
Right.
Right. So, and then other times people will write it out or they are clear on the dream or where they're going, but either there's things that come up that get in their way. And I was like, I need to help people figure that out. Not just college kids with freshman advice, but really like people that are now living life and are stuck. And so I started from the very beginning being very curious about what has people get stuck and how to help them, not tell them what to do because that doesn't do anything, right? Because now then you're dependent on me for, you know, and you don't have a level of ownership to it. But have you start to understand your inner workings to understand what has you stuck and why?
Hmm.
You know, that's so profound, Hildy. And it's interesting. One of the big reasons that we started this podcast, this Rebloom, is because we felt that in conversation with so many people. And we wanted to inspire them because they were stuck. They were either stuck in a career that they didn't like. They had turned off their creative heart because people said, "Oh, you need to go have a really, I don't know, a job that's more practical." And what we're finding is how important it is to get unstuck. And sometimes they don't have the tools to do that. And so that's why we started Rebloom. We're like, okay, well, each of the tools may be different, but yay for you to kind of help us to kind of see some of that, because people get stuck, really stuck.
And I think the more important the place is or the pivot you're making, the more difficult it can be. It just means you're up against a challenge. And when you're up against a challenge, it means you're up against something you deeply care about. Because if
Yeah.
you didn't care, it wouldn't be a big deal. But because you do care, that's the light for this is the place to go.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you find someone in that place, what are some of the things that come to mind that get people stuck? And
Love that question. Yeah, so I say there's a few things. One, do you know what you want? Can you language it? Can you write it down? It sounds easy, but writing it down with feeling written from the positive, like no negatives in like it's like I'm not going to do something. Here's what I'm doing. So you're writing it from the present tense so we can train our mind to believe that it's already happening. You're writing it with positives, no negatives, no digs, and no pie in the sky. It should be like a year out, which starts to get you in the game of believing and in the game of creating. So that's the first thing. Do you know what you want? And many times, until you start writing it, you think you do. And then when you start writing the dream and it gets hard to write, just stay curious about why. Right. And then if you're not sure about two different paths, write the dream for both, because I promise you, it'll start to tell you something. How you write the dream, if you're even able to write the dream, starts to move you in that direction. So one, writing the dream is a place that people can really be stuck because they're not sure. Once you write the dream, now the rest of the stuff can come in, right? And it's like it's always going to be sitting on the side, and that's okay. But once you have the dream, then you can start to write down what's getting in. What am I thinking, right? Because our inner dialogue really does. Our thoughts do drive our feelings, which drive our actions, which drive our results. So if you can get back to the thoughts, you can start to look at them and examine them for what they are.
So one of the things that we did at the retreat when I was with you, and I believe these might be exercises through the company you were with, was kind of going through all the pillars of your life, your family, your faith life, your profession, all of the things that make up a life, and writing down where we are today and where we want it, what's our dream vision for each of those pillars. And that exercise was really, really helpful to me.
Yeah, because it allows you to stop, and no one's allowed to beat themselves up for any of this process, but it allows you to stop and do a real evaluation, like, where am I in these lives, in these aspects of our life, but staying curious about rather than anything else, right? Because there will be areas that you will be happy with or comfortable with, and then there will be areas that you want to change. But if you come at it from a place of curiosity, it opens up your eyes to be able to just tell yourself the truth about what matters and what you want and where you are. So
Mm.
once you take that temperature, now you can go, okay, I'm not going to start on all the areas of my life at the same time, because that's a disaster, but you just pick one or two that really matter to you and begin to focus on them and watch the dynamic of how that shifts the others.
I love this so much, Hildy. When I work with some students, I always talk to them about their personal mission statement. And really, that's what you're helping folks do, is to create it. But not only that, with feeling. I'll talk to students and they'll be like, I want to be here and there and did. But if you really focus in on your feelings and why you want to move forward, to your point, it kind of helps bring it all in together. And it helps you not only to say yes to things, but it also helps you to say no to things too. Because I see a lot of people who will do, well, I'm going to do a little of this and a little of that and a little. Okay, but it spreads you so thin and doesn't necessarily propel you forward. And I love that you're bringing people in with focus and intention, because that really allows you to keep being curious, but yet moving forward and purposeful. And I love that.
Yes, profound no's, I call them. You really,
Yes.
they're even more important than the yeses in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, because the no opens the door for the right thing to come through.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Let's switch back to your journey
Yeah.
for a minute. So you were doing life coaching. You've been doing that for 15 years, but I believe that there have been even some pivots within that realm.
Yes. And I think being human means like the pivots are coming, and it's
Mhm.
actually very important, and it keeps us experiencing life and the journey of life. So pivots are celebrated and a great way to constantly be checking in and reevaluating and changing. So I've been coaching for many years, loved it, loved the results, loved the ability to be like on a three-legged race with somebody. Like, where are we going? What are we like, just cheering them on and being with them as they experience it. And then my dad got sick. And it was like one eye opening for me, because I realized I didn't know that much about grief and loss. And I
Uh-huh.
certainly didn't understand very much about death, except what I mean, my spiritual belief was there, but this is like in the flesh happening in front of me. And I'm like, oh, I don't even know how to do this. Like, so I started to do a lot of studying on grief and loss. But I also started to say, well, let me put my own method, let me put this method of the hand down method, which is what I coach from, let me put this to practice with dying. And I was like, oh, what's the first thing I tell people to do? Write a dream. I'm like, how do you write a dream for somebody dying? Right. So
Right.
we also coach people on really having important conversations and how the power of that conversation is. So I knew deep down I needed to have a conversation with my dad. But my inner dialogue, thinking about what's getting in the way, was like, I don't want to bring this up to him. I'm going to make him feel bad about dying. Like, I'm going to make things worse for him. This is being very selfish for me. So I was giving myself an entire lecture on why I shouldn't. But deep down, I knew it was going to be the change the first moment that things would start to change for me. So I sat my dad down and I was like, I have something really hard to say to you, but I think this is important and I want to design this phase with you. And I don't know how to do this. I've never done it with anybody, but I'm like, I want to support you and listen to you and help you as you go through this dying process. And I was like, my dad's like, what are you worried about? And I was like, well, the first thing I'm really worried about is I'm going to forget the sound of your voice. And my dad was like, wait a minute. And he's like, when you were a little girl and you saw a penny on the ground, what did I tell you? And I said, oh, that the angels are talking to me. And he's like, yes. When you see a penny on the ground, I'm talking to you. And that was the first sign, like the first hint that like, oh, maybe my relationship to death needs to grow a little bit. Maybe it's not just the end. Maybe there's ways to communicate and, maybe the veil is a lot thinner than I thought it was. So, but that was the beginning. So then my dad and I started talking. I was like, well, in this method that I teach, you write a dream. And my dad's like, well, let's write a dream. And I was like, write a dream for you dying? That feels like, and my dad was game. My dad was full on game for it. And then I sat down and I wrote a dream and I asked him, what matters to you? And he was like, oh, I want to go to bookstores. I want to be able to, even if I can't go to church, I want to be able to go at a quiet time and go through the vestibule and light candles. And okay, what else matters to you? So we went through his list about the things that mattered to him. And then I wrote the dream for my dad and for his death. So, yeah. but that then woke me up to how to live around my dad and to what we were going to do that mattered most to him.
Wow. Wow.
And it's very different than somebody else's. Somebody else might be like, oh, I want to have good food. Oh, I want to watch the football games on Sunday. Oh, I want to, but it took something for me to hear what my dad really cared about the most so that I could help design that in for him.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I think it's so important, Hildie, to have those conversations. I've been listening a lot to Anderson Cooper's Grief podcast, which is phenomenal.
Yes.
And he talks a lot about that, about how we don't talk about grief. And as many of our listeners know, we lost our daughter a little over a year ago, and it's been hard. We didn't have some of those conversations, and I'm going to pull back the tears. But with my mother, who passed, much like your father, I was able to have those conversations. And it's hard because you don't want to take away hope from the person that you're losing. And they know it and you know it, but you want to keep them going, but yet you want to honor them. And I think having that conversation is probably, they don't know how to, they don't want to hurt us and we don't want to hurt them. And that's the thing that is just a challenge. And, I wish we'd been able to have those conversations with our sweet girl, but we didn't. But grief is difficult, both if you're preparing for it, but it's also grief is difficult on the other end. And so bless you for the work that you're doing to help people with this. It's really important.
Yeah, it's really hard on both ends.
Yeah.
Right. And for you, there's a different level of grief because there wasn't any time to prepare, which just, right. It makes it even harder in some ways.
Absolutely. It does. And the one thing that I've realized, it's interesting whether you know or whether you don't know, you still must grieve. And how you grieve, and if I go back to what you started this conversation with, it's defining your purpose with feelings. And, people have said to me, oh, can't believe you're doing so well, or well is not really, but I have purpose. I have I feel that I must share hope and joy with the world as best I can, and that keeps me going, and share the stories of my sweet girl, or share, and so I do have goal. I think that helps even for the griever.
Yes, it does. And it doesn't take the grief away, but it can go along, it can walk alongside of what you're creating, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah. I believe that this podcast was born out of your experience, Jamie, because
it was.
this was an idea that you had before, Elise, but after this gave you purpose. And so
Yeah,
I came along on the ride with you to support you because it is important. And I feel like, conversations, especially the ones with someone like you, Hildy, is maybe someone will just take some nugget away that will they can apply to their life and make their life that much better.
For sure. And one of the things I do is I'm a death doula. So I sit with people um, at different stages, sometimes all the way at the very end. And what I will say, the thing that allows people to have some of the most peaceful deaths are remembering the meaningfulness that they had in their life, or what they gave back, or that doing something meaningful is extremely powerful,
yeah,
Mm.
extremely powerful. And it doesn't have to be something like, wow, earth changing big. It's like, where can you find meaning in every day? Where could you do something that makes a difference? Or where do you do something you don't even know the difference you're having? But, you know, when you act from purposefulness, results show up.
and I think the other thing that's really critical and important is you're allowing people to use their voice and to communicate what those are. Oftentimes, I know with my mother's experience, and even with the grief experience, people will say, they're surprised when we speak, and when we need to talk. We need the person who's passing needs to speak, and they want to share, and the person who's grieving wants to share. We have a lot of things that we want to let people know, and it's when we're shut down that makes it harder. So for me, the ability to speak, and I think what you're giving to those that are passing as a death doula, you're giving them the ability to communicate and say what they really truly mean in their heart, and that is a huge gift. That is a huge gift.
I also lost my father in 2021, and he and I always had a kind of a tough time talking to my dad through my life. He's a quiet, stoic man. I'm an introvert. But in the last couple months of his life, it was the greatest honor because I spent a lot of time with him navigating in and out of hospitals and facilities and things. And I was sort of with him a lot. And he talked a lot about things in his life. And like I had the gift of being with him and feeling closer to him than I ever had before. So, I do feel like in those times, as hard as they are, there is real beauty in being able to do that preparation together with that person.
Yes, people need to be witnessed. Grief needs to be witnessed, but
Mm-hmm.
everything needs to be witnessed, right? And there's power that comes from being. Most people really want to be heard more than they want to be right. So when you have
Right.
people having disagreements, it's really about wanting to be heard way more than oftentimes it is about being right. And I love that. Yeah, being able to witness and hear and just being there with somebody can make a huge difference for all parties involved.
Everyone.
Yeah, and I
Everyone.
know when my husband's father passed away, I mean, it was imminent and we were all, at the hospital, but it was too difficult for his brother and sister to be there. So they left and we stayed, and they kind of had a much harder time after the fact dealing with his passing than my husband did because Steve was present and there through the process. So it is very, very hard, but it's like I said, I think there's really something profoundly beautiful about being with someone when that moment comes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's something, look, none of us are getting out of dying. So we might as
No.
well start to get curious about what it's like, what we want, what we care about, who we care about in our lives, what kind of impact we want to make. Like, so you can see how dealing with my dad's death really has me, death sits on your shoulder, really draws you forward or pulls you forward or has you look at life very differently. So,
Yeah.
one, from the context of like your relationships and what matters to you and who you're close to, but also from the context of like, wow, I don't know how much longer I have. What am I going to do that's going to make a difference in the world? How do I be a support? And this podcast is a perfect example of like, we all pivot, every single one of us. So if we
Yeah.
could give somebody support while they're pivoting, whether it be from a death, whether it be from a job loss, whether it be, who knows, it could be positive or negative, but supporting people as they start to like take the steps to go, wait, what's the dream? Wait, what's getting in my way? Wait, what are one step I could take to get there? We're beginning to help the world grow.
You absolutely are. And you had said earlier that your work as a doula has helped you as a life coach. How has that work helped those that are not, that they're not going through grief or not experiencing, but how is it helping you in your work as a life coach with others?
It's the game changer, because now I'm
Mm,
like, what are you going to do? What do you do that matters to you? Because most of us will walk around and do like we dumb our dreams down, like I was saying, till I'm like, oh, it's okay, I can just work this job, or I could do this little bit. But the truth is, we're not really living that way. And if I was to say to you, look, this is your last year, look, like, let's just say year, you know what I mean, like, what are you going to do this year? What do you not care about anymore? Could you let go of what somebody else thinks about you? Could you do something that you enjoy doing? What would you do if you weren't afraid of the impact of it? Which then has people, like, it has me like push a little bit to go like, no, 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 no settling here, because life is short. And
yeah.
then we don't understand the impact that we can have on somebody else with whatever we choose to do, whether it's doing a piece of art or even a ceramic piece that somebody else gets to take with them, whether it's creating music, whether it's anything we do, can really be something that can make a difference in somebody else's life, in addition to you doing what you love.
That I have a question about that. So I feel like, well, I don't know, but this is my theory that when you are living life where you're paralleling something that you love to do, but it also serves others in some way, that seems to me like the best place to be.
Yes. And what I'm going to say is, don't think you know what you're doing is impacting somebody else, because you have no idea. Like, if we
Mm.
live looking for results, where is it, where is it, where is it, we're living from the world of where is it not, right? But
Hmm.
if you really start to go, like, just go, okay, today I'm going to see, I'm going to make 3 people smile, I'm going to talk to 3 people, but it starts to open up your world for what you're doing versus just living on the results of what you think could have happened, right? Like,
Mm.
I love that. So Lori and I share a lot on social media, and many years ago, I made the intention to share just flower joy every day. Just share flowers. No, no, no. People are like, "What do you do? Do you sell?" I'm like, "No, just put my joy out there." And it's interesting. I love what you just said, Hildy, because people will say, "You brightened my day. You made me smile." Like, I'm not. I'm doing it, quite frankly. I'm not doing it for money. I'm doing it for me because I think our world needs a little more joy, but I'm also sharing my journey, but it does impact other people. And I think that that's so important. if your results, if it's all about the results, if it's all about the money, if it's all about it, you can go with that intention, I suppose, but I don't know that you'd be as fulfilled. I think I'm more fulfilled just putting out my joy each day and hearing about it in a roundabout way. You made me smile. Oh, that's perfect. That's wonderful. And Lori does too. We just put out our art joy every day.
Yep.
And yeah.
Yeah. And it is interesting because sometimes I'll put stuff out there that I think is just some weird obsession I had, but then it inspires somebody else to make a weird brush bird alongside me or whatever. And they'll say, I wasn't feeling very creative and I saw that and it sparked something. And then
Right.
that becomes that much more meaningful that it was shared.
Totally.
Heck, the whole purpose of this podcast is to help other people. It's the whole, and we've said that before. We're not going to retire on this podcast, but we are trying to help spark that joy with other people. And that's the goal. And I love it. Let's take a quick minute and thank our amazing sponsors. Our podcast is proudly brought to you today by Jet Creative and Urban Stems. Jet Creative is a women-owned marketing firm committed to community and empowerment since 2013. Are you ready to rebloom and build a website or start a podcast? Visit jetcreative.com/podcast to kickstart your journey. They will help you bloom in ways you never imagined. And bonus, our listeners get an exclusive discount when you mention Rebloom. And a huge thanks to Urban Stems, your go-to and our go-to source for fresh, gorgeous bouquets and gifts delivered coast to coast. Use Bloom Big 20 and save 20% on your next order. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Rebloom Podcast. Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to you for joining us today.
So one of the things that I always insert into the conversation, and Jamie probably knows what's coming, I always am so curious about, like, what was Hildie like as a little girl, and how were there seeds of what you're doing now in you when you were young?
Oh my gosh, that's such a fascinating question. Well, yeah, when I was a little girl, one of the first things, my mom was scared of cats, right? Just FYI. So honestly, I found a stray cat. I must have been about 6 years old and snuck it in my house. Okay, not my finest sneaky moment, but and hid it in my closet because I wanted to take care of this little kitten because I was afraid. So, my parents tell the story about, like, one, that I would be so sneaky, and two, that I would think I could actually hide a little kitten in my house. And then three, my mom said, she sent me out and she saw me walking up the street with a little, like, talking to this little kitten, I'm sure just giving it a little pep talk before I sent it off. Probably sent it back to its mom, but whatever. But, and then I was, even older when my job, I have a twin sister. Her job was washing the dishes. My job was drying the dishes. But I would dry the spoons and pretend I was a nurse and, like, lay them in the hospital bed, and then dry the forks and lay them in their hospital bed. Like, there was something about me that was a caretaker from early on. I could not be a nurse because I'm way too panicked in a moment of, I'm not that person, right? But you could, from early on, it was a caretaking piece around me. And, death always intrigued me. When I was growing up, like, I went to the funeral home with my parent, like, that my parents just lived in, like, I grew up thinking like it was just what it was. When we had a hamster that died, we buried it, and we would have a procession. And, I'm Ukrainian Catholic, and they're big on processions and whatever. And we would process around the house, and then we would bury it in the backyard. Like, it was something that I focused on versus not. And I always was a caretaker. So I think part of what I'm doing now fits perfectly in terms of, I coach people because I want to get them to a spot where, they want to be, that they could get over this next hump. Like, we're all going to have them. But I think from early on, there were signs of me doing that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So when you are working with someone else who is going through the process, are there exercises or things that you can share with our listeners that they can adapt?
I would love to. So, first, what I'm going to say is, one, think about the dream. Write it from what you want, right? And then I know writing the dream, automatically the inner dialogue starts with, I can't have it. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I don't know how to do that. I'm not good with technology, blah, blah, blah. Write those down on a separate piece of paper. They do not deserve to be on the same paper as the dream. But I also don't want you to dismiss it, because I promise you, if you don't say it, it's going to sit in the back of your head and it's going to grow bigger and bigger, meaning you're going to believe it more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
So if you literally can't write the dream, then first write out all the reasons why not. Like, dump it down, and it has to be like bleh, coming out of you. No editing. No editing. Period. Not even like, I was an English major and I would want to like put a new paragraph. No, not allowed to do any of that. Just dump it down there. Because when you dump it out of your head, one, you're saying it. Like, it could be witnessed over here without having to impact the dream over here. Once you get it all down, now we can start to sift through it and explore. And you could try yourself. You might need somebody else, a dear friend that's going to be your advocate, who's advocating for your dreams, to read it with you if you trust somebody. But then stepping back and looking at it piece by piece, line by line, thought by thought, and holding it up and going, is this actually really true? Like, I'm not good with technology. Is it really true? It might be really true. Is there something to do about it? Yes, I could learn something.
Absolutely. I don't know if Hildie, this is advice that you would give, but I know someone gave me this advice and I loved it. And this is for the dream part of it. They said, write down, I really, 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 you got to write down really 3 times. I really, really, really want. And then write it all. And because if you really, really, really want something, then you really, like, you're passionate about that, and you can really. And sometimes when you think, okay, do I really, really, like, I really, really, really want to travel. That's something that I want to start doing, and I want to incorporate that into my dreams. And it's important for me to start saying that. But if I say, oh yeah, I want to go here or I want to go there, well, then it may never happen. So I don't know. For me, when I'm starting to think of my dreams, I think, okay, no, really double down on that super big dream. And what is it? What is it? And I'm obsessed with what you just said earlier too, about feelings and putting your feelings into it. I think that's critical for everyone.
I also really loved asking the question, what would you do if you had a year to you knew
Yeah.
you only had a year to live?
Yeah.
And
Bye-bye. Cancel. A lot
yeah.
of people would be canceled in my world.
Well, like,
yeah.
I lost both parents in 2020 and 2021, and turned 60 and sold our studio, and like a whole bunch of stuff all happened at once. And you're right, when you're faced with all of those things, you start asking yourself some questions, and it's been so easy for me to say no to things more and more, and say yes to the things that I really, really want to do, because you start realizing you don't know how long you have here. You better, if you have some dreams, you better start living them and making them happen.
Right. And it doesn't have to be all or nothing. So,
Right.
like, Jamie, when I'm like, your dream could be like, I'm a traveler, an
Yeah.
adventurer. I use curiosity, and I just, like, starting from that place doesn't mean like I have to travel all the time, but you're creating a sense of like enthusiasm and joy, and the words that you're using around it can then have you just begin to get curious, which then a goal might be like, oh, I travel somewhere new every quarter, but just writing that dream about I'm an adventurer and I'm an explorer. I'm exploring my next adventure. I love to travel. I stay curious for what shows up in front of me and, the joy I can find on each trip. Like now that starts to open you up to be like, ooh, where am I going? Versus like, oh God, I have to go somewhere.
Right. Right. Yeah, no,
Cool.
that makes complete sense. And then it also gives you permission to call the small wins or the small things that you've done successes. It's not going to Europe. It could be going to an art museum in your community. You're still traveling somewhere. You're still curious. I love that you've differentiated those things. That's fabulous. That's a great way to look at it.
And it doesn't mean that you're not going to eventually go wherever, but it just means if you don't do the all or nothing, it opens up you up for possibility. Right. And
Yeah.
then you can start to go piece by piece, step by step, like shooting arrows of love, what I mean? Little bits of things versus thinking like, if I don't do it all right away, well, that trait does not really help us because who wants to jump into the deep end when they can't swim? Like, it's not really even a smart idea.
Right.
I
Right.
was thinking about like if you were writing your life story was a movie and you had to write the character study for yourself and what that main character's attributes should be or you want them to be. I think that would be a fun way to think about it.
Oh
Yeah,
boy. Yeah.
that's a very fascinating question to think about it in terms of, I think tenacity is my number one. I think that's the game of life. Could you get back up? Can you just get back up? Right?
Mm.
Regardless about what you're doing. And then when you get back up, could you find some level of joy in it?
Mm.
Right. And
Mm.
so,
Yeah.
I'm not that great with movie people, but I really do believe that if I'm talking about personality traits, tenacity makes a difference. And then a joy seeker really if you could find joy in every minute, like you're open yourself up to possibility.
Mm.
Mm.
Wow, what a great
Yeah.
conversation.
I know. It, some conversations are hard. But these hard conversations are often important. And it takes a lot of bravery, Hildy, to have those conversations that you're having with the people are, um, who are passing, who are dying. And we've had a lot of conversations, my husband and myself, my family, this past year about grief. And as I said, we're very open about it. And the best way to have that tenacity and to find that joy again is to be open and to talk about it. And it's bless you for helping those folks who are leaving and their families. And it's important work what you're doing. It's huge. So
Yeah. And even if you're scared, if you're in a, like, I'm going to go back to like just giving a little coaching tip for like
yeah.
writing out what you're worried about, writing about what you're scared about, just dumping it all down on paper is what in the Handel group we call a purge, like getting it all out, which then can have you go back and look at it, but also just can have you just say it. Just saying it is powerful. Um, and so that even in terms of like a hard conversation with somebody, two things. One, you're right. What's the dream for my relationship with that person? Right. Because now that sets you up to why am I having this conversation? Which
Right.
very often makes a very big difference as to how you're going to go about the conversation is why are you having it? Right? If you deeply care about the relationship and you acknowledge that in the beginning of your conversation, it shifts how the other person even starts to hear you. And it shifts how you language it yourself.
Hmm.
Right. So that is really important. And then if you're like, I'm scared to have this conversation, write down why. Because I'm like, oh my God, my dad's going to think, and then I'm blah, 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 blah. And I write this all down and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Actually, I'm just the one who's uncomfortable. I don't even know
Yeah.
what and if my dad was uncomfortable, great. Like I could design something. I don't have to use the word. I could just be like, what do you care about doing the most? Let me make sure that whatever we're doing, feeds you or gives you what you want, or like, well, what do you want to do? It can even be that simple without having to set the context of like, because you're dying. It can even
Right.
be like, wow, I deeply care about you and I want to do things with you, or I want to make sure I do the things you care about the most.
Mm.
Exactly. I love you and I want to honor you. And how can I best do that? And that's you're giving folks their voice to say that. And that's what people need to do. And I think we need to love and honor ourselves too as we go through life. And I can see how your work as a doula has impacted your work as as a life coach too, because we need to love and honor ourselves, and we need to use our voice, and we need to say what it is. We need to dig deep and find those dreams. And I think that's
Totally.
where people get stuck. I think that they, to your point, they let that negative stuff just fill that. Well, I can't, I shouldn't, I've got to do. And Lori and I've said often, look, many people have to have a day job. We get that. But there's still a way to bring in a little creativity or a little beauty or a little joy in your life. Could be gardening, could be hiking, could be cooking, it could be anything. If there's something that you want to do, but to not let that dream completely go away. It's important.
Totally. And when I started coaching, I had to have another job. I had kids and they're getting ready to go to college, and I was a single parent, and I had a lot going on. But I'm like, okay, it doesn't mean I'm quitting everything and going to start to build this practice, but it means like, let me start to build and then see when I get to a part when it switches to what's my full time and what's not. But it's step by step, which for me, I could do all or nothing, which can really set me up to do nothing. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
the could be overwhelming, so never mind, I'll do nothing. And I was like, that's the voice
Yeah.
in our head that's not going to serve you or your dream.
Yeah. I also think that something that stopped, I know it stopped me in the past, is that I feel like before I do anything, I need to have like it all figured out, and it has to be like perfectly pulled together, and every aspect I know what's going to happen. But then the times where I just plunged in, like this podcast with Jamie, like we just kind of, she asked me to do this, and I was like right away, like, well, gosh, I don't know technology. I don't have a personality for a podcast, like all the things. But then we just did it, and it's just, we pat ourselves on the back now because we're like, Jamie, we didn't have to do 10 sound checks today. We
No,
actually had the sound going right.
we
And
did it.
we just do it, and then you grow, and now like we have this huge list of people we want to talk to. And yeah.
Because you know what, if we did exactly what Hildy said and we put all the negatives, and trust me, I had my list as well. But the one thing, Hildy, is that Lori and I both love to teach, and we love to connect, and we love to share. And that is the common bond. We share many other common bonds, but that was the underlying dream or goal of this podcast, is to connect and to share and to teach. And by doing that, you're right. I don't know that we knew we were doing it, but we did put the list together of all the reasons why not. And there were a lot of them. But I think we let the ultimate dream come through, and it was to put some more joy out there, and we did it.
And to talk to people like you who,
Yes.
provide tools. Like I've been writing copious notes. I hope our listeners have too.
Yeah.
I
This
love
hour.
that. I love you're like, no, we had a dream, right? And like, okay, great. And you're like, no, now we have the list of what's getting in the way. But when you really think about it and you write the dream from the place of like, either it
Yeah.
gives you goosebumps or it just like makes you like, ugh, that now has you not settle. It starts to like pull you. I like to say pull you forward. Like it's like every morning I read my dream and I'm like, oh, that's right. I am a
Yeah.
healer on a mission. I do speak and live boldly. Like especially for me who could be a pleaser, the speak and live boldly forces me to go like, even saying that feels good for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think helping people and connect. And so, yes, we are, I think we have unknowingly, but now knowingly, thanks to you, Hildie, we've I don't know, we're following our dreams, and hopefully others will do the same. We love to have our listeners, or have you leave our listeners with a little piece of advice, maybe something that you always tell your clients, something that sticks with you, or maybe people tell you. What's some advice that you love to share?
I love to say, start your day wisely. And that could mean, like, when I brush my teeth, I think about, is there anything I've said that wasn't kind to myself? Like, can I love myself? Or, like, if you can't love yourself, it makes everything else way harder. So I'm like, can you prepare? Can you start your day from a place of being grounded and self compassion and self love? So I'm going to say, one, think about, is there anything you need to say you're sorry to yourself for? And I do it when I brush my teeth, I clean my mouth. It's like just a symbolic place for me to do it. And then when I get my coffee, I sit down and I look at those dreams. I look at my top 3 dreams that I'm creating and I read them because it reminds me about where I'm going. Otherwise, the dream voice can be very quiet. It just kind of whispers over there. And all these other reasons why not, they get louder and louder and louder. So if you sit down and one, you're like, do I any place I need to say I'm sorry to myself? Okay, yes or no, fine. But you end with like, I love and accept myself exactly the way I am. And then I sit down and then I read my dreams and I remind myself about where I'm going. Now, regardless about what I do, I start it with like where I'm going.
I love that. I love that.
Perfect.
Perfect. Hildie, this has been an incredible conversation. Important. And I hope that our listeners have enjoyed it as much as Lori and I have. This has been
I
very
knew
profound.
it was going to be a good one.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm so glad I met you years ago. I'm so glad I was with Amy and that little aha moment struck me that, oh my gosh, Hildie would be perfect. And you really were. This was wonderful.
More than perfect. Thank you.
Oh, I am honored to be here. I'm honored. Like, the world, the creative world, we need that more than ever right now. We need joy in so many ways, in so many places. And even if a listener doesn't think they're making a difference, I swear you have no idea the difference you're making. You have no idea the ripple that can cause by anything, even an act of kindness, an act of creativity, an act of joy. We're collectively changing the energy.
We are. Thank you
Absolutely.
so much. Thank you so much. And to everyone, peace, love, and rebloom. Life is too short not to follow your passions. So go out there and let your heart plant you where you are meant to be and grow your joy.
We will be right here sharing more incredible stories of reinvention with you. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode of Rebloom.
Until next time, I'm Jamie Jameson.
And I'm Lori Siebert.
Peace, love, and rebloom, dear friends.